The South China Sea is boiling over. In mid-September 2025, a joint U.S., Japanese, and Philippine task group sailed into Manila's exclusive economic zone, a clear statement of alliance and international law. China's response was predictable and aggressive. They issued public warnings, ramped up Coast Guard patrols, and used water cannons and dangerous ramming maneuvers against Philippine vessels. Independent monitors have confirmed that these harassment incidents have nearly doubled between 2024 and 2025. Beijing even tried to declare a so-called marine reserve at Scarborough Shoal, a thinly veiled attempt to seize territory. This high-stakes game of chicken isn't just about drills. A few months earlier, a Chinese spy ship turned this tension into a dangerous, full-blown standoff. As Philippine Coast Guard Commodore J. Terriella observed, the presence of this intelligence-gathering vessel inside our EEZ is a clear provocation that demands a firm response. Now, why should you care about this patch of water? Because $3.4 trillion of global trade flows through it every year. Analysts warn that a major clash here could shave 10 to 15% off Southeast Asia's entire GDP and create a supply chain shock worse than the Suez Canal blockage in 2021. This is where the standoff that changed everything began. Let's rewind to July 2025. The BRP Teresa Magbinua, a modern 97-meter patrol vessel of the Philippine Coast Guard, was on patrol about 70 nautical miles west of Manila. Suddenly, it spotted and intercepted a Chinese ship. But this wasn't just any vessel. It was the Tianwang Xing, a Type 815G spy ship designed to soak up electronic signals and intelligence. China's reaction was immediate and overwhelming. They rushed in a huge China Coast Guard cutter, a highly advanced Type 052D destroyer named the Gian, and even a Z-9 helicopter to shield their spy ship. This all happened while the U.S. and Philippines were conducting Exercise Cope Thunder, with American F-35 stealth fighters flying out of Philippine bases. You see the picture here? China is trying to normalize its intelligence gathering deep inside another country's territory, while the Philippines, backed by the U.S., is adopting a risky but necessary strategy of persistent presence. They're refusing to be pushed around. But this isn't the full story, because what Washington was building behind the scenes would change the entire balance of power. For years, a terrifying thought has kept Pentagon planners up at night. What if we get into a major conflict and run out of missiles? China's strategy was built on this very idea, that they could win a short, sharp war by exhausting America's limited peacetime stockpiles. Well, that calculation has just been thrown out the window. As former Undersecretary of Defense for Policy Elbridge Colby noted, the U.S. must surge production to deter a fait accompli in the Pacific. China's missile advantage can't hold. The Pentagon has ordered American missile makers to double and in some cases even quadruple their production output across 12 critical weapons lines. We're talking about the systems that would decide a conflict in the Pacific. Patriot PAC-3 missile interceptors, long-range anti-ship missiles, or LRASM, SM-6 multi-mission missiles, and of course, the Tomahawk cruise missile. The numbers are staggering. Lockheed Martin is on track to produce over 600 PAC-3 interceptors in 2025 alone, with the goal of reaching a global capacity of over 1,100 interceptors per year by 2027. Patriot missile production is already up 20% year over year. At the same time, the U.S. is squeezing China's tech footprint. A judge recently upheld keeping the drone maker DJI on the Pentagon's blacklist, and the FCC is blocking Chinese-tied labs from testing new tech. The strategy is simple but sweeping. Rearm the arsenal, reshore production, and restrict China's tech footprint. A three-front campaign to choke Beijing's military options before a single shot is fired. But all this production matters because new game-changing strike networks are already in place. And it all starts with a system called Typhon. In September 2025, during a massive joint exercise called Resolute Dragon 25, the U.S. Army quietly did something that has completely changed the strategic map of Asia. For the first time ever on Japanese soil, they deployed and test-fired the Typhon mid-range capabilities system. So what is Typhon? Imagine a standard semi-truck trailer. Now imagine that trailer is carrying 4 vertical launch cells, the exact same kind used on Navy destroyers. This truck-mobile launcher can fire 2 of the most versatile missiles in the U.S. arsenal, the Tomahawk land attack missile with a range of over 1,000 miles, and the SM-6 multi-mission missile, which can hit ships and land targets over 200 miles away at supersonic speeds. By placing this system at a base like MCAS Iwakuni in the Ryukyu Islands, the U.S. has effectively turned these islands into movable, unsinkable destroyers. This isn't happening in a vacuum. Tokyo is buying 400 of its own Tomahawk missiles, upgrading its destroyers, and expanding its own coastal anti-ship missile batteries. The result is a shift away from relying on big, vulnerable bases to creating a distributed elimination web of smaller, mobile, and lethal assets. But just as allies were transforming the battlefield, Russia and China launched a coordinated move of their own. Just as Typhon was making its debut in Japan, a coordinated naval ballet unfolded. In mid-September, Japan tracked a Russian spy ship, the Kurili, as it passed through the Tsekuru Strait in the north. At the same time, a powerful Chinese naval flotilla, 2 Type 052D destroyers, a frigate and a supply ship, passed through the Miyako Strait to the south. And that's not all. These surface movements were backed by joint Chinese and Russian submarine patrols, with their Kylo-class and Great Wall boats working in tandem. Now, none of these ships violated any country's territorial waters, but their purpose was clear. They were mapping strategic choke points, testing Allied response times, and practicing for a real conflict. This creates an incredibly tense environment where the risk of a miscalculation or an accidental collision is dangerously high. It's a two-front pressure campaign designed to intimidate. This isn't just a temporary alliance of convenience. It's the physical manifestation of the no-limits partnership that Beijing and Moscow have been building for years. Their goal is to present the United States and its allies with a paralyzing strategic dilemma. By coordinating their actions, they force the Pentagon to split its attention and resources between two separate massive theaters of operation, Europe and the Indo-Pacific. A crisis in one region could be deliberately timed to coincide with a crisis in the other, creating a nightmare scenario where American and Allied forces are stretched to the breaking point. This coordination extends far beyond naval patrols. Intelligence sharing between the two powers is at an all-time high. They conduct joint strategic bomber flights over the Sea of Japan and the East China Sea, practicing nuclear strike missions. Economically, they are working in lockstep to build financial systems that bypass the US dollar, insulating themselves from sanctions. What we are witnessing is the hardening of a new global axis, a pact sealed in steel and shared resentment of the Western-led order. Their naval flotillas are more than just a probe. They are a calculated message. They are demonstrating that any potential conflict over Taiwan will not be an isolated regional affair. It would immediately have global implications, potentially drawing in Russian forces from the north and creating a multi-front war that would test the limits of Western power. This calculated escalation is designed to make Washington think twice, hoping to shatter its resolve before a single shot is even fired. But what China and Russia may not have fully realized is that the missile Crossfire they were worried about is already operational, from both the north and the south. Here is where the whole picture comes together in a truly terrifying way for Chinese war planners. The Typhon system that was tested in Japan wasn't the first to be deployed in the region. Back in 2024, the U.S. Army forward deployed a Typhon battery to Luzon in the northern Philippines, and it is reportedly still there. With launchers now in Japan to the north and the Philippines to the south, the U.S. has created a north-south crossfire that blankets the entire first island chain. From these positions, Tomahawk missiles can now threaten Beijing, Shanghai, and China's entire industrialized east coast. They can hit command centers, air bases, naval ports, and logistics hubs. This mobile shoot-and-scoot capability complicates every single phase of a potential Taiwan invasion, from the initial marshalling of forces to the perilous crossing of the Taiwan Strait. The threat is now so credible and so persistent that military analysts are noting talk of a pause in the PLA's invasion timeline. But the deterrent isn't just about missiles, it's about crippling uncertainty. Here's what makes Typhon a commander's worst nightmare. Because the system is airliftable by a C-17, can be set up in a matter of hours, and can move after it fires, an adversary has to assume it could be anywhere at any time. Is it hidden in the mountains of Luzon today? Is it tucked away on a small island in the Ryukyus tomorrow? You never know. This forces the PLA to waste enormous resources on a constant 360-degree search for a handful of trucks. This creates what military strategists call deterrence by uncertainty. It compresses an enemy's decision time and dramatically raises the risk of making a fatal mistake. But just as China was grappling with this new land-based threat, Japan unveiled a technological breakthrough at sea that threatens to make China's most powerful naval strategy completely obsolete. As Japanese Defense Minister Gen Nakatani declared, this railgun represents a leap in our defensive capabilities, ensuring we can neutralize hypersonic threats before they reach our shores. Remember the futuristic weapons you see in movies? Japan just made one real. Aboard its test ship, the JS Asuka, The Japanese Navy successfully fired the world's first operational shipboard electromagnetic railgun at sea. Instead of using gunpowder, a railgun uses a massive pulse of electricity, about 5 megajoules in this case, to launch a solid metal slug at hypersonic speeds of Mach 6.5 or over 4,500 miles per hour. There's no explosive warhead. The sheer kinetic energy of the projectile is what does the damage, punching through ship hulls, shredding decks, or obliterating incoming drones and missiles. The best part? The cost per shot is incredibly low. For years, the U.S. Navy tried and failed to build a practical railgun, eventually shelving the program due to technical problems. China's program went quiet, but Japan just crossed the threshold. If they can perfect this technology for their future destroyers, they could field ships with hundreds of rapid-fire hypersonic rounds. It completely changes naval warfare. A Chinese destroyer could sit in the path of a Chinese missile swarm, the very strategy China relies on to defeat U.S. carriers, and simply shoot down every single missile at a fraction of the cost. When you put it all together, the U.S. industrial base surging to produce thousands of missiles, mobile Typhon batteries creating a Crossfire from Unsinkable islands, and a Japanese railgun that can render missile swarms useless, you get a structural shift in power. China's plans, built on a strategy of overwhelming force, have collapsed under the weight of a new, resilient, and technologically superior Allied defense. And this isn't the end. The next clash shows exactly what happens when China dares to challenge the U.S. military.